Good Erev Shabbos, everybody. We begin Chumash Sh'mos, the book of Exodus, Parshas Sh'mos. We know that Paro issued harsh decrees upon Klal Yisrael, and Moshe, when he grew up, he went out to see the hardships and the suffering of his brethren. And he sees one Jew striking another. Moshe intervenes and says, "Why are you, a wicked one, striking your fellow man?" And they say, "Are you going to afflict us as you afflicted the Egyptian yesterday?" For the day before, Moshe saw an Egyptian who was wickedly and cruelly beating a Jew for no reason. And Moshe then says, "Ochei noida hadavar." Now it is known. Simply, this means that now what I did, which I thought was done quietly, privately, nobody would know about it, now I see that indeed there are those who can publicize what has happened. But Rashi tells us something else. Moshe was so disturbed. What is it about the Jewish people? They're good people, they're fine, they're ethical, they have integrity, there's dignity, there's honesty, there's responsibility. Why are they singled out for this suffering at the hands of the Egyptians? What flaw exists in their character? And Moshe said, now I know what that flaw is. That Jews will speak to the government or to others about other Jews. They will make known what I have done. They don't ask me why I did it, but they just make the statement publicly. They don't look upon another Jew as if it's their own flesh and blood. Now I see that this distinction of one Jew to another as separate entities, this is the flaw that exists. And therefore Moshe is captured by Paro, and miraculously he escapes. He goes to Midian, and there in Midian he is caring for the flock of his father-in-law Yisro. And he comes to the area which would be Mount Sinai. And Hashem appears to him in the burning bush. And Hashem says to Moshe that I have seen the suffering of the children of Israel, and I want to send you that you should go to Paro. And Ami b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, and take out my nation, the children of Israel, from Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mi anoichi ki elecha Paro, who am I that I should go to Paro? V'chi oitzi es b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, I should take out the children of Israel from Egypt? Hashem says, I will be with you. Did Moshe think that Hashem was going to send him to Paro all by himself on his own, to rely upon his own wisdom, to come and stand before the king? Of course Hashem will be with him. Hashem is sending him. Hashem said, L'chavi eshlachacha, go, I will send you. You will be my messenger, my agent. What exactly was Moshe's concern? The Kli Yakar points out, in which he says that Hashem says to Moshe, and you will take out my nation, the children of Israel, from Egypt. Why does Hashem have to point out and say, my nation, the children of Israel? Is there another children of Israel, which is not Hashem's nation? Is there another nation that can call themselves, I am Hashem's nation, other than the children of Israel? What is Hashem emphasizing by mentioning these 2 points? In addition, the Kli Yakar notices that in the 10 Commandments, the first commandment, we say, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeisecha mi'eretz Mitzrayim, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And yet here, there's no mention of the word land. Hashem says to Moshe, you will take my nation, the children of Israel, out of Egypt, mi Mitzrayim, not me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt, but from Egypt. And Moshe says, and who am I to take the children of Israel out of Egypt? How come here we don't find the word land being used. What is being noted? Hashem was telling Moshe Rabbeinu that you are my messenger. And when you take the children of Israel out of Egypt, you will serve God. You and all of Klal Yisrael will serve God on this mountain. For on this mountain, Klal Yisrael will willingly and lovingly accept and receive Hashem's Torah. Why is Hashem telling Moshe this particular point now? How is this relevant to Moshe's mission of going to Paro? The Kleyaka says a very beautiful explanation. Moshe was disturbed. Moshe's question was, I know, Hashem, that you are making me your agent and that I should go as your representative to Paro and that you will be with me. I'm aware of this. But who am I that I should go to Paro? Moshe was very humble. Moshe said, I'm physically flawed. I stammer. I'm not familiar with the language. I'm not a good speaker. And not only that, the Jewish people, I will go before them and they will look at me and they won't listen to me. There have been prophets. The prophet Ezekiel tells us that in Egypt, God sent prophets, outstanding, remarkable prophets, to awaken his children and to inspire them and arouse them that they should remove the idolatry that was cast upon them by the Egyptians. And yet their words fell on deaf ears. And Moshe says, who am I to go before the children of Israel? I'm not a speaker. I can't make a presentation. The words don't come out of my mouth. And when I do, I stammer and I stutter. I won't be accepted before the children of Israel. And even if I am, how can I take them out of Egypt? Moshe is saying that he understood what Hashem meant. Hashem said, take them out of Egypt, not the land of Egypt. I'm not talking now about the actual physical exodus, but rather Hashem said, Moshe, you will inspire Klal Yisrael to remove the assimilative forces, the influence of the Egyptian culture that has permeated the psyche and the behavior of Klal Yisrael. The values of the Jewish people have become so affected and corrupted and diseased by the impurity of the entire environment of Egypt that they have almost lost their feature as Jews. And Moshe, your mission is to go before Paro and to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. Not the land of Egypt. Take them away, take them out, purify them, elevate them, sanctify them, arouse their souls to once again ascend to the point of faith and trust in God. And the sparks of holiness will burst into flames. And Moshe says, how can I do that? One can take the Jew out of Egypt, but how does one take Egypt out of the Jew? How do I do that? Who am I? They won't listen. And even if they listen and they give me the respect to hear what I have to say, the task is insurmountable. Look how they've fallen. Look how they snitch on each other. And to this Hashem says, I want you to take my nation, the children of Israel, in spite of their flaws, in spite of their assimilation, in spite of the fact that they have even been engaged in idolatry that was thrust upon them by the Egyptians, they are still my people. They are my nation. Don't think that I have cast them aside. Don't think that they are unworthy. These are my nation. These are my people. And they are still the children of Israel. They still retain the great title of Israel. the title that God gave Yaakov, you shall rule over angels, you shall rule over man, you shall be in a position in which you will be revered because of the holiness and sanctity that you bring to the world. In spite of the assimilative forces, they are still my nation, and they are still the children of Israel, my children, my firstborn. Despite the fact that maybe they have lost their path, Moshe, the children of Israel, it doesn't take recreating the world to help them return to who and what they truly are. Moshe says, how? Hashem says, you will bring them to this mountain, and here they will serve me. How do they serve Hashem? By accepting willingly and lovingly his Torah. You ask the question, we can take the Jew out of Egypt. How do we take Egypt out of the Jew? The answer is accepting God's Torah. If we think for a moment what this means, God, the creator of the universe, has imbued man with the ability to receive, to perceive, to enjoy, to study, to grow, to ascend by virtue of God's divine word, his Torah. Is there anything more important in the existence of the universe than man receiving, studying, revering God's Torah? Bereshis bara Elokim, Rashi tells us, the Medrash, that the Torah is referred to as Reshis, the Reshis Chochmah, the first. This is the first. This is the essential. It is because of Torah, the first, that God created the whole universe. Moshe, how can Jews become purified when they find themselves immersed in the filth and the stench of the impurity and the corruption of thought and behavior of Egypt? The answer is the great purifier is Torah. To set aside time to study Torah, to hear a Devar Torah on the Parsha, to read through the portion of the week, to attend the shir in person or by Zoom, to be influenced and allows our souls to be aroused and connected unto God through his Torah. This is the great purifier. This is how we purge ourselves. This is what Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu. The exodus of Egypt is not something for Hollywood and for stories. It's not something for history, but it's talking to us today. As the Jews found themselves immersed in a foreign culture that was deteriorating their Jewish identity and all the Jewish values and foundations that were handed to us by our patriarchs and matriarchs, we find ourselves in the exact same circumstance today. How many of our people have no Jewish identity, lost total concepts of what true Judaism is, recognizing and serving God, loving God. That's our mission in this world, being a light to the nations, of showing them God's presence and the eternal kindliness and boundless love that God has for all of his creations. This is what it means to be a Jew. And we do this by virtue of God's Torah. Today, more than ever, do we find ourselves drowning in the impurity of an environment throughout the world and a culture that is strangling the purity and strangling the basic decency that our faith promotes and demands. How can we possibly take Klal Yisrael from this exile? How can Mashiach Tzidkenu, the righteous Mashiach, how can he possibly purify us? What can be done? We can be taken out of the exile, but can exile be taken out of the Jew? And the answer is absolutely yes. Tavdun esu aleikim b'har hazeh. Serve God on this mountain, wherever our mountain might be. We have God's Torah. We have so many Svarim, holy books translated in English with wonderful explanations that help us appreciate and love God's eternal divine word. This that we're studying, this is not just portraying and telling us history. It's current events, and it's also showing us future elements that shall be revealed. It's coming attractions. Moshe was the anointed one and the appointed one to deliver us from exile in Egypt. Mashiach will be the anointed and appointed one to deliver us from this bitter exile today, to the final redemption that may we be worthy of witnessing speedily in our lifetime. We find ourselves immersed in the filth, but we are still God's people, his nation, his beloved children, his firstborn. We are the children of Israel. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay Jewish. Have a good Shabbos.